I want to keep it really short and simple actually today. That I want to talk about two concepts that I really want you to take away and remember. And I kind of want to give you, they're very high level concepts, but they're really important because they give you kind of a bigger picture framework to consider all kinds of marketing activity with. And once I go through it, I think it'll make more and more sense what marketing actually is and how we can look at it from a slightly different point of view, not just a tactical point of view. So the first point I want to talk about basically relates to the context of your marketing. And this is actually, to me, I think this is the single most important thing to consider before you do any marketing, because, and it's actually also the reason why the vast majority of marketing will fail. Because as consumers, it's really important to know that we don't just, rock up somewhere and impulsively buy something and pay a premium for it. Instead, consumers, including patients, right? And sometimes we don't think of consumers or patients as consumers or vice versa. They go through a psychological process, right? So as patients, if we have a problem, we identify that we have a problem and we establish a need. And then once that problem or that need is sort of painful enough, then we go about figuring out how to solve that problem. Now, those stages of awareness, or sometimes also called the buyer's journey, you might have seen it sort of framed in a slightly different way, can be loosely categorized into 5 different stages. Now, the first stage is when patients or consumers are problem unaware. So this is the vast majority of people in your ecosystem, right? So this is where a patient might have crooked teeth, for example, they might be missing a tooth, but they might not have any problems associated with that. It might not cause them any issues whatsoever. So they're typically problem unaware. They don't know they have a problem. They don't know how that shows up in their life. Like I said, that's the vast majority of people. Because if you step out onto the road and you start offering Invisalign to everyone who walks by, the vast majority of people might have some overcrowding or overbite or whatever, but they don't have a problem that they're aware of. They're not experiencing that in their life. The second stage or step is when someone becomes problem aware, right? So they're experiencing the problem that your treatment basically solves, but they're unaware that a solution exists. So, this could be the patient might sort of feel insecure about smiling. They might cover their mouth when they smile. They might constantly be trying to find the right angle in pictures. And, they might know that there's some sort of facial asymmetry there, but they're not sure what the reason is. So they're aware a problem exists, but they don't know yet if there's a solution to that. The next stage of kind of the buyer's journey, or the stages of awareness, a patient they know they have a problem, they become treatment aware. So they know they have a problem, they know there's a treatment or a solution out there, but they are not yet sufficiently motivated enough to solve that problem. Now, this is really important because this is also quite a large category of people. So people that, they know they have an issue, but they're not yet, they know there's a solution. So I have crooked teeth, I want Invisalign, or I have a gap in my smile, I want an implant. But they are not yet sufficiently motivated to solve that problem. So they're not motivated enough to reach out to you, to come in, to book in for a consultation, to have a Zoom call with you, whatever. Now, I just want to stop right there, because when you do any form of outbound marketing, okay, and I'm talking about sort of one-to-many outbound marketing, right? Like a flyer drop or banner advertising or a magazine advert or a Facebook ad or radio ad. Now, most of the recipients, most of the people who see that are going to be in stage 1, 2, or 3, because this is sort of an inverse pyramid, right? We need to think of the top as being the largest chunk of the population. Now, don't get me wrong, patients in stage 4 and 5, which we'll get onto, they are included, and you might be able to target them, although that's not always going to be a perfect science. So now, bearing in mind that if you're running an ad like that, what will happen to that kind of audience? What will happen when you offer £1,000 off Invisalign to patients in stage 1, 2, and 3? What's going to happen? Nothing, because it's not relevant to them. If someone is not in the market to buy Invisalign, to have Invisalign treatment done right now, or to have their teeth straightened, £1,000 off Invisalign is not going to produce any result, right? Yet, when we start marketing, a lot of practices will think, oh, we need to do an offer, let's throw in free whitening, let's throw in free retainers. But if someone is not yet ready to buy, that's irrelevant for them. Now, what do you think will happen if you get an inquiry from someone who's, let's say, in stage 3, and you book them in for a free consultation, but you don't ask the right questions and you don't take a deposit? They're going to FTA. They're not going to show up, right? Well, what will happen if you talk about your iTero scanner or your financing plans, or the fact that your practice has been serving the people of Kidderminster for the last 400 years? No one's going to care, because that information is not relevant to them, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean these people are time wasters. Okay, it doesn't mean they're tie kickers and time wasters. It just means that they're not yet ready to buy. And I think that's really, really important to understand. However, any questions at this stage? I don't know if Drew or Chris, you want to throw something out there?
Well, I was going to ask you, and I probably will now that you've done it. And what you're saying here is that the first 3 stages, they're just not motivated. But so there must be something blocking them. Now, you will address this, but the marketing campaign's got to be different to them. The way you address these people, the way you highlight things to them will be different.
Absolutely, exactly. So, knowing that the majority of people in your ecosystem, in your area, are going to be in stage 1, 2, and 3, you need to tailor your messaging accordingly. So in this case, if they're in stage 1, 2, or 3, what you want to do is you want to illuminate the problem to them. You want to articulate that. You want to, illuminate the problem that they're experiencing and almost make it more, people say they're rubbing the pain points. I don't really want to say that, but you need to help them articulate the problems that they're experiencing in their life. You need to make it very vivid. You need to, your marketing needs to talk about how that shows up in their life, right? Little subtle things like, for example, if someone's teeth are not straight and they're not symmetrical, then people might feel like they need to find the perfect angle in a photo, right? And they might have an angle when they take a selfie or whatever it is. I mean, these are the things we deal with nowadays, right? But and so illuminating those pain points, highlighting them to patients, that's what you need to do, and you need to educate people. So if someone is treatment aware, they're aware treatment options exist, but they're not yet sufficiently motivated to solve it, you need to educate them. Because by targeting them at this stage in the journey, yes, they're not ready to buy yet, okay? Which is why you run a Facebook ad that says the wrong kind of thing, you're going to get a bunch of time wasters. But if you say the right kind of thing, you can actually plant seeds and you can enjoy first mover advantage as a practice, because you're talking to these people before anyone else, any of the practices in your area are talking to them. So that's kind of, that's the upside of starting earlier up the treatment sort of life cycle, because you can build that rapport earlier, you can educate them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess the thing I'm sort of looking at this as well is they're not just aware. So actually, how do you find them? Because when you say someone's problem unaware, or maybe just problem aware, that's a huge pool of people, isn't it? That's that covers a fairly large market.
Absolutely, absolutely. The majority of people, your marketing will not be relevant to them. There's no point chasing people in stage 1. There is a point in chasing people in stage 2. There's definitely a point in chasing people in stage 3. But let me flip it on its head as a dentist, right? So I've done this before when I did a public speaking engagement. You go into a room, you ask, okay, out of 100 dentists in the room, who's in the market to buy an iTero scanner right now? Okay, and then maybe 2 or 3 or 4 people will raise their hand.
Mm-hmm.
If you change the nature of the question and you articulate it differently, you say, who wants to increase their Invisalign case acceptance? Everyone's hand is going to go up. So it's about how you phrase your ads. It's about what language you use, what copy you use, and where you start to plant the seed. Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's sort of stage 3. Now stage 4 and 5. So these are the final 2 stages where the patient is sort of closest to buying. So stage 4 is where they're motivated and they're actively researching and evaluating the best options for them. And finally, stage 5 is when they are ready to buy. Now, these last 2 stages, they can, like all of the stages actually, but these last 2 specifically, they can vary in duration, okay? So typically, the higher the investment that's required from the patient's point of view, the longer it'll take. So for example, if you have an affordable whitening at your practice, like boutique or something, sorry, Prem, then people might almost sometimes buy it on a whim. If it's just a few £100, they're in the chair, they're there, they might as well get the molds done. And they think, actually, it'd be really nice to go to Marbella with whiter teeth, or whatever it is, right? And they might just buy it on a whim, and it might be an impulsive buy. However, a double arch all-on-4 case, it might take months or maybe even years for someone to make that decision. They'll come in for a consult, they'll think about it, they'll go away. I mean, I want to buy a car at the moment. I want to buy an electric car, and I've spoken to so many brokers and salespeople, they're all sick of me because I'm not ready to buy yet. I keep going back and changing my criteria and thinking about what I want and all that kind of stuff. So the status quo for most practices are patients within stage 4 or 5. Okay, so what most practices are used to is patients within stage 4 or 5. So think about your word of mouth referrals, for example. someone is only going to come to you if once they've asked their friend about their lovely teeth, and they ask where you had them done, and they reach out to you once they are ready to engage your services, or at least have a conversation about engaging their services. Clinical referrals, same thing. If someone has a bunch of missing teeth and they want to talk, they go to their GDP to talk about implant options or whatever the options are, and the GDP refers them to, a specialist, or someone who with a special interest in placing implants. The patient has been vetted and qualified before they're in your chair. So again, they're going to be in stage 4 or 5, which is why clinical referrals will enjoy a very, very high conversion rate once they're in your chair. Website inquiries, again, same thing. If someone is Googling teeth straightening in Scunthorpe, and they end up on your website and they had a look around and they look at your smile gallery, your fees, you can be pretty sure that they're either motivated and or near enough ready to buy. So existing patients, word of mouth, clinical referrals, website inquiries, they more or less sit in these buckets. And that's why sometimes, tongue in cheek, I say dentists are spoiled. Now, of course, I don't mean that. I know enough about the profession to know the ups and downs of it. But sometimes, if someone has a toothache, someone has a problem, if I want an implant, I have to go to a dentist. And so, sometimes we have an abundance of patients through these that are sufficiently motivated to transact with us, to buy treatment with us, to trust us, that sometimes once we start marketing and looking outside, those things can fall flat on their face, because actually principals realize, damn, it's really hard work to get a Facebook inquiry in my chair. Oh, I really have to nurture them. And if my receptionist tells them about the price and then they're scared off, and then if I ask for a deposit, they don't want to give it on the phone, all this stuff. So for me, the most important message I want to get across here is that it requires, once you start any form of outbound marketing, just have an open mind and remember this slide, because it requires a slight shift in mindset. But if you remember that, then you're perhaps going to be more forgiving and more willing to experiment and more open about adapting your processes and making the marketing campaigns a success. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on with this slide. Now, stage 4 and 5, I mean, that is your low hanging fruit, to use a horrible term, and that's much lower effort. And I know Chris is a big proponent of this, and I know when I prepared this slide, I said, I know this is definitely not going to conflict with what Chris stands for, because you know what, I'd be the first person to admit that you need to nurture your existing patient base. You need to focus on word of mouth. You need to, a lot is there that is, for most practices, is going to be untapped potential. That you can look at before you start doing cooler stuff like Facebook ads. So that's kind of on that slide. Now, the key takeaway is understand that different marketing channels, so word of mouth, Facebook ads, Instagram, SEO, they're going to appeal to people in different stages of the buyer's journey. Okay, so no matter how good your product or your treatment is, it isn't going to appeal to someone who isn't experiencing the problems that your treatment is designed to solve. Consequently, as you alluded to earlier, Drew, your messaging, the messaging that you use, should differ depending on each stage, right? So someone in stage 3 is not going to be interested in the fact that you offer a guarantee on your work, or that your crowns are 3D printed, or that you offer financing, because they're not in a problem solving or a buying mindset, and therefore those criteria are irrelevant for them. So your messaging in stage 3 should focus on articulating and illuminating the problems as vividly as possible to help move that person down this pyramid, if that makes sense.
But I think the other thing I might like to add here and ask is, when you have limited, say you have limited resources, or you have finite resources, whichever way you say it, you almost need to hone down, because it's probably not the best thing to say we'll go for stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 people. You kind of hone down to use your finite budget, your finite channels, everything, and get a certain group. You might say, let's get the low-hanging group, or the stage 2 or stage 3. So before you make your plan, that's a decision you have to make.
Absolutely, and I had a quick look at Chris's slides, and I know Chris will elaborate a lot more on this and give some useful implementable stuff. But definitely work from the bottom up. So start with 5, and then 4, and then 3. I wouldn't spend too much time going above 3, because you're going to spend a lot of money trying to educate a market that is not ready to buy yet. So, but definitely start with existing patients, word of mouth, clinical referrals. Nurture that. I know, Chris, I've heard you say that there's enough there to support your career, full stop. And I believe you. I think that's true. So the last point I want to say on this slide is that, and I've only got 2 slides. The next one I'll be a bit shorter and quicker on it. But your front of house is probably only used to dealing with stage 4 and 5 patients. And so therefore, if a stage 3 patient inquires or ends up on the phone to your front of house, and they ask you, how much do you charge Invisalign? And if your front of house say, well, sir, it starts from 3,995, you're going to lose that patient because they're not sufficiently motivated enough to solve their problem. And therefore they won't sufficiently understand the value that you offer. Okay, does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Just a comment from me here, actually, which is that one of the interesting bullet points on the right-hand side there is the very last one, where you've said your front of house are likely only equipped to deal with stage 4 and 5 patients. And it takes me back to the practice plan workshop tour that I did 3 years ago with Sheila Scott. And as part of the preliminary for that tour, practice plan actually mystery shopped their own clients, and they called 242 practices and asked one of 3 questions. The first question, can you give me some information on Invisalign? The second question, can you give me some information on dental implants? Third question, I've just moved into the area, I'm looking for a dentist, can you help me? That was it. I wish I had the slide with me to share with you, but let's suffice to say, over 80% of the calls, number one, the telephonist didn't offer their own name. Number two, the telephonist did not ask the name of the person making the inquiry. Number three, the telephonist did not give any useful information to the patient whatsoever. Number four, the telephonist did not ask the patient whether they would be interested in booking an appointment. And those stats range between 80 and 85% of those calls. The interesting thing about the workshop tour is we revealed those statistics on the slide. Everybody in the room said, well, that's not my team.
Of course.
But it's really, really interesting that I think, Drew, there's a future event there, which is that once you've actually driven the marketing to those stage 4 and 5 people, you'd better have a front of house team that's actually trained to deal with those inquiries themselves when they come, let alone stuff that might come in from 1, 2, and 3. Back to you, Derek.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I always think those little anecdotes and stories are very interesting. And, we give as a marketing company, we sometimes give front of house a hard time because we want our inquiries to be followed up with in a certain way, and we try our best to handhold people. But I sympathize too with the front of house, because if there's, if they're taking payment and they're on the phone and they're tearing off a card receipt from whatever it is, and they're doing a million things at the same time, it's tough. But it is a challenge. So yeah, I mean, so if past marketing initiatives have perhaps failed for you, then the chances are that it's probably due to either a combination of the wrong marketing channel message and people in the wrong stage, or your front of house is perhaps not sure how to adapt their follow-up process to deal with inquiries, which, as I mentioned, is very common with sort of Facebook and Instagram inquiries, who have slightly more, slightly shorter attention spans. So yeah, work from the bottom up. About 5 to 25. It's about 5 to 25 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing one. So just keep that in mind.